Please be seated. Good morning and welcome to the 2023 Indigenous Veterans Ceremony. It's wonderful to be here in so much brilliant Queensland sunshine today. The cool, of course, has disappeared and the sun is shining on this beautiful event. And why wouldn't it when we acknowledge those who have gone before us and those who have served their country in so many different beautiful and brilliant ways. We have a number of people to acknowledge this morning, and I know sometimes when we have the ceremonies, people go, oh my goodness, why do we name all of these people? Well, the good part about that is that there are so many people that want to come today and acknowledge the commitment and the service and the sacrifice of those who have served our great country. If we were just standing here and there were 6 people standing around the shrine, it'd feel pretty lonely, wouldn't it? It would feel like those in our community haven't acknowledged that service. Well, today, because we do have so many people, it's a wonderful gift and a wonderful signal that that has been acknowledged and accepted in our community. I'd like to welcome our veterans that are here in uniform today and those that aren't, and all of those who are proudly wearing their medals that they have earned through their service, or their descendants that are now wearing those medals in acknowledgement of that service and sacrifice to our great country. I'd like to welcome the Honorary Aide-de-Camp Lieutenant Commander Nicholas Robinson, representing Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr Jeanette Young, Governor of Queensland, Bart Mellish MP, Assistant Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Public Sector, representing the Honourable Anastasia Palaszczuk MP, Premier of Queensland, RSL Queensland State President Major General Stephen Day, David Crisafulli, representing the Leader of the Opposition, of course, because he is the Leader of the Opposition, so it's wonderful to see him here. Councillor David McLaughlin, representing the Right Honourable Adrian Schrinner, Lord Mayor of Brisbane. Stephen Bates MP, the Federal Member for Brisbane. James Lister MP, Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs. Auntie Lorraine Hatton, Indigenous Elder of the Australian Army, appointed by the Chief of the Australian Army. Members of the Australian Defence Force. Members of the Queensland Emergency Services. Stephanie Foster, representing the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Honourable James Douglas KC, representing the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. Ms Erin Lang, representing Reconciliation Queensland. Our guest speaker, Uncle Marsat Ketchell. And of course, all of our veterans and families that are here today as well. I'd like to show my respect and acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on where we gather today, to elders past, present and emerging, to all First Nations people and Torres Strait Islanders if you are here today, and people of all faiths, beliefs and customs for joining us here today, because we are all inclusive. I'd also like to welcome all of those people who are live streaming this today and watching us right around Queensland and other parts of the world that are tuning into this particular ceremony. Because this is the 17th Indigenous Veterans Ceremony that has been held here in Brisbane. It's hard to believe that it's only 17 years since we've been commemorating such incredible service to our great country. And it's an initiative of RSL Queensland. It's become an important week of the annual National Reconciliation Week. On this day 1 year ago, we had a beautiful memorial unveiled down in the park here, just on the steps down below us, that represents all of those First Nations people that have served. An incredible amount of work went into the design, into the sculpture, into the placement, into the fact of just getting it settled in this beautiful Anzac Square. Auntie Lorraine Hatton had a large component to do with that, and I know it's a lasting legacy of her service and will continue to shine. In the recent Anzac Day commemorations, we do a service before the actual Anzac ceremony and a few days before, where school children come from all across Queensland to commemorate Anzac Day. And it's now become part of that tradition, through a little bit of encouragement from those that host that event, to get the kids to go and stand around that First Nations memorial, to touch it, to feel it, to run their hands over the traditional markings on the warrior's chest at the front of that beautiful statue. And we're starting to see that statue shine. from the interaction of the kids touching it. There's some beautiful shiny elements on the ridges, on the markings, on that beautiful statue. And when the sun hits it at exactly the right moment, it sparkles. I encourage you, if you do get an opportunity today after the ceremony is completed, go and stand down there, because the sun will have swung around and it will be catching those beautiful glints of light. It's a fantastic design feature that has come about, and it's wonderful to see, and I encourage you all to do that. We commemorate today this service the acknowledgement that many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were treated neither equally or fairly during and particularly after their return from active service. Despite serving side by side alongside other veterans, they were denied the same entitlements for every other Australian veteran who fought for their country. They were often overlooked, and this important commemoration is hoping to heal those wounds, those injustices. I'd now like to invite Uncle Joseph Kirk from Braden Chambers to come forward and provide our welcome to country. Uncle Joe is a First Nations elder and grandson of Frank Fisher, a light horseman who served as a scout in the 11th Battalion of the Australian Light Horse Regiment during World War I. And coincidentally, this weekend out in Chinchilla, the Frank Fisher Cup is being held, which is a rugby league tournament, whereas there are some great elements of the Indigenous locals are playing teams, including the Queensland Police Service, in games of football out there this weekend, and it is called the Frank Fisher Cup, honouring the services of Frank Fisher and his brother, I believe, Frank Fisher as well, who has also had the nickname of Big Shot. So Uncle Joe is connected to the Fisher family, and hopefully will give us a wonderful welcome to country today.
Well, good morning, everyone. What a great day to have our Indigenous celebration. Our MC gave the welcome to everyone who is very important here this morning, and I acknowledge that as an Aboriginal elder of Brisbane and Ipswich, originally from Cherbourg Aboriginal community, where as a young boy, the same age as my grandson, under the Queensland government, we suffered. We had it very hard on Cherbourg Aboriginal community and the other 14 communities here in the Queensland state. But things have changed now in 23. 67, as you know, we became citizens of this great country of ours. So we've got a lot to celebrate today. We've got a lot to celebrate for our Indigenous diggers and service men and women that was there in the early days to make life better for their families and for making life better for all of us as Queenslanders. That reconciliation is very important today. So we celebrate. And through my grandfather, Frank Fisher, I acknowledge and celebrate Anzac on the 25th of April, and that's my special day as an Aboriginal elder. It brings us together on the 25th of April. We're a nation that celebrate our servicemen and women, that brings us together in reconciliation, and how important it is that we are all Australians under the one flag. And we're proud as Aboriginal people to stand here and say that we're the citizens and the First Nation people of Australia. So I recognise all the Aboriginal elders that are here this morning that are here to celebrate our Indigenous men and women. It's really important that now we got recognition as First Nation people that we've been here for 60,000 years. And we're proud as Aboriginal people and First Nation people to share our tradition and our culture. And as my mum said to me when I was 15 years of age, Joseph, I want you to read these letters of your grandfather who served in the First World War. And when I read his first letters, the 5 pages had dry teardrops on every page. He wrote them when he was a serviceman in the Light Horseman Brigade, the 11th Battalion. And the story that he told in his letters, and I share that on the 25th of April every year. I don't know of many people that know the Anzac tree. Put your hand up if you know the Anzac tree. Who knows the Anzac tree? Well, my grandfather put it in his first letters. And he told this story I'd like to share with you today. In his letters, he said, all the girlfriends and fiancés and wives were having babies in the hospitals while they were overseas fighting for this wonderful country we call Mother Earth. They were having their babies, and the government of the day decided to give those mothers a present to take home in memory of their servicemen. And they gave them a plant to take home and plant in their yards as memory of their servicemen. And the plant that they took home wasn't a eucalyptus tree. Their plant was a jacaranda tree. And now these days, in 23, you can go through any town and any city in Australia and you will see the jacaranda tree from those mothers that took those little plants home and planted them in memory of their servicemen. So it's not a eucalyptus tree, it's an important tree from South America, and it's a jacaranda tree that flowers every year for our servicemen. It's not for our young people that are doing exams in their school at year 10, year 11 and year 12. It's for our diggers, lest we forget. That's how important the jacaranda tree is for me. And no matter where I go in Australia, I will always see my grandfather and our diggers in the jacaranda tree. That's where they are. The memories are there, lest we forget. So it's really important to me now as an Aboriginal elder that I know the stories of our servicemen that gave their lives for we, the Australian people and First Nation people. So let us remember from this day on how dedicated our Indigenous diggers was to Australia without recognition when they came back. But now today we stand here as proud Indigenous First Nation people and we recognise them and we remember, lest we forget, that they served for us. And we can carry on now in 73, not being cattle and sheep as we were before 67. We are now counted as First Nation people in the states of Australia, as an Aboriginal people who are proud people, that we have a tradition and a culture to share to all Australians, and whoever comes our way, we welcome them as First Nation people. So on behalf of First Nation people here in Brisbane and Queensland, I say to you, Yamamuli, hello, welcome. Yamamuli bunjijawi muyajagu yaja muyagayi, which means hello. Welcome to this spiritual land of ours we call Brisbane. And we call it Mother Earth, and may God bless us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uncle Joe. I just learned something very important, and I hope all of us take that on board. And every time we drive through a town in Queensland and we see those beautiful jacaranda trees, we mention that story. What a wonderful gift you've just given us. Thank you, Uncle Joe. Appreciate that. I'd now like to invite Major General Stephen Day, State President of RSL Queensland, to give an acknowledgement of country.
We, today's warriors, acknowledge the very first warriors who stood duty to guard the ancient country that we meet on today. We salute their commitment to an unbroken line of duty that extends back tens of thousands of years and continues unbroken to this very day. We respect that. We acknowledge that, and we're grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General. I'd now like to ask Defence Force Chaplain, Clinton McGoldrick, to come forward and lead us in prayer.
Good morning, and I greet you from the Warramai Nation, for which I am a proud descendant. Let us pray. Creator Spirit, we cherish your words that no greater love has a person than to lay down their life for a friend. Today and every year at this time, we willingly and gratefully pause to remember and pray, giving thanks for those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men and women who served in time of war. Those who sacrificed everything for the sake of families, their friends, their colleagues, their mates, their country, and the freedom, the love, the friendship and peace that symbolises. We not only remember today, but we commit ourselves to a world where the values they fought for are cherished, protected and remembered. May the peace of God's kingdom one day soon put an end to all war and all violence, in remembering and acknowledging the human cost of war and the price beyond telling of those who served. We pray that God's reign of peace, justice, dignity and love will come in all its fullness, and that the values of those who struggled and suffered for us will be always and everywhere respected, preserved and built up ever stronger. May peace be in the hearts and minds of all people in the world. Amen.
We're very fortunate today to have a fantastic Indigenous artist with us. Aaron Martin will now play us a piece that he specially crafted for today's ceremony. It'll help set the tone and help set the feeling for our guest speaker before he takes to the lectern this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Aaron Martin. Thank you, Aaron. I'd now like to invite our guest speaker to come forward. Uncle Marsat Ketchell enlisted in the Royal Australian Navy as a junior recruit at the age of 15. That was in 1970, and he served for 26 years. He served on HMAS Vendetta, HMAS Sydney, and HMAS Vampire, and deployed to Vietnam in a logistics role. He later travelled to Canberra, Darwin, England, Germany, Cambodia, right across the Pacific, and into a number of different roles, including clearing World War II ordnance that had been left behind. That was in Papua New Guinea. He also became involved in training counter-piracy staff to work in the Philippines. He also trained the ceremonial guards of the royal family while he was visiting in country Hampshire. Marsat's lineage and heritage is of Bardu and Mer Islands in the Torres Strait and the Watati tribal nation of northeastern Cape York. Not content with just serving his country in that way, he's now continued serving and is with the Queensland Health Department and is now working in the mental health space. He's been doing that for the past 25 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Uncle Marsat Ketchell.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Two things that kept me alive so far is the sound of a didge, which tells me a story, or I have to do a story, and our waru, our traditional drum in the Torres Strait, which tells me I have to go home. Inabot raw mabaigil, ngay kay mesto nitmul kumura, nitmul augad, kay pukulay maril. Lak nitamura inakay, garwi de meina, tanmun lag. I thank and acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the ground that we are gathered, and your higher spirit, and the spirits of your elders past. I thank everyone gathered here today on their land. I pay my respect also to my non-Indigenous veterans here today. I pay my respect also to the serving personnel past and present. Distinguished guests, representatives, ladies and gentlemen, I'm indeed proud and humbled to be present here today and represent the Indigenous servicemen and servicewomen and also our families on this significant occasion. I'm Marsat Ketchell. I'm a Torres Strait Islander. I am Badulgal Wakaid from Badu Island. I am Miriam Zagareb from the Murray Islands, and I'm Wutati tribal nation, northeastern Cape York, and I'm a veteran. I'm Australian. Being an Indigenous person in Australia and enlisting in the Defence Force at the age of 15, I was introduced to many cultures and traditions, primarily the Royal Australian Navy and the Commonwealth Armed Forces for Queen and Country. I felt a sense of responsibility to my native sovereignty, Zenat Kes, or the Torres Strait, as I listened to stories of how proud my elders were in uniform, especially the ones from the Torres Strait Light Infantry Brigade, the first fully Indigenous brigade ever formed in Australia and still stands today. Thus, for me, enlisting was to honor the thousands of Indigenous service people, persons, both past and present, and served and sacrificed for our nation. Noticeable for me was in Vietnam when I was involved in the first retreat of Sri Ra. Three of them, once the campaigns came off, I noticed that three of them were Torres Strait Islanders, and that gave me also a sense of pride, I guess, that they were serving. This ceremony is our day to reflect, and for our wider community, including ourselves, the vets, to accept ourselves and to accept us and celebrate that we have a proud history of military service, in the Australian Defence Force that continues today, and that your forebearers, all of us here today, are indeed Australia's heroes. I understand today, in my current work, that past injustices were advantageous to the government of the day. Very little was known publicly about the Indigenous service personnel and veterans, and what our Indigenous cultures and traditions meant to us and how it affected us, either in our own community, the wider community, the workforce, and actually in combat. They faced trials and tribulations throughout. I mentioned trials and tribulations, and I came up with persecutions, judgments, tests, experiments, ordeals, pains, sufferings, and the list goes on. This was not only from the Defence Force, but also from our own knockers, the knockers out in Civvy Street on our return to our homes, bearing another culture with us. Us as people or persons of colour were tangled in two cultures. Indigenous personnel normally stand out in comments and taunts from being from a minority group. The general population of Ship's Company tended to build their stories about us as we stepped on board. Some good, some bad. I took an opportunity as a standout, in inverted commas, to be almost being a narcissist. From a different perspective, I wanted to uphold a proud me, a proud Morisot. Years gone, I read a quote by a New South Wales governor a long time ago. We must discipline these savages. And me being the larrikin that I am sometimes, only sometimes, and taking advantage of a position in Canberra, I stepped outside the box, so to speak, and with goodwill intended, I savaged the disciplines. I like people who laugh. I savaged the discipline by proactively promoting the introduction to cultural awareness and cultural orientation. This led to consultations with government organisations and non-government organisations for concepts and means of Indigenous employment, training, education, recruitment, retention, and enlistments. Throughout my service and my life, I applied two laws, L-O-R-Es. One is the law of Malo, from my Miriam side, from my Murray Island side. It is Tagmauki Mauki, Teter Mauki Mauki, Adleged Mimikak. It is the law Koiki Mabo took to the High Court. It defines, if you walk on my land, I will deal with you. If you touch anything on my land, I will deal with you. If you ask, you will receive. And in my gunnery branch, my other law was civis pacem parabellum. If you desire peace, prepare for war. And I used that throughout my life, in my family, the kids I talked to at school, to go to war in their inner self, in themselves, not in another country, in themselves, if they want to rest easy and steer towards the outcomes they want in their life. For the good, I am confident to state that today our mob continues as a family would, as brothers and sisters to each other, and ensure amongst themselves there is zero tolerance for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and non-multicultural segregation within the armed forces. If so, it is not obvious, not mentioned, or is individual. There's little room for mestec lawyers and racism on our ships. What matters is identity, pride, courage, camaraderie, equality, and teamwork. I cannot praise highly enough for today's Indigenous personnel in the Defence Forces of Australia, serving in country and overseas, and on deployments around the world. And most importantly, the care and encouragement from you, the families. As a veteran, I am proud I contributed, as did others, in being proactive in the protection of our people, our younger personnel, our country, and our nation, and knowing that caring for country in whatever form runs deep in the soul of every Australian. For me and current serving personnel is that we are all equal in the Defence Force. In uniform, we are one skin. The past will always be with us, but is to be held as a reference to right and anticipated wrong. With gratitude and jest, me again, for us gathered here today, a Collier veteran, a non-Indigenous veteran, called me from Western Australia last year at the opening of our memorial and asked how we were doing. I replied, Bala, brother, Bala, there is more medals here in Anzac Square than the Commonwealth Games. It's a blackout. His reply to me was, I was in there actually, but I don't drink, October 2002, but I was in there with the other vets. You've all been there, done that, and still here today. You all deserve that recognition. I'm proud I served with you, mob. I'll make it my story. Bravo Zulu Kaz. Bravo Zulu means well done in Navy terms. Being Reconciliation Week and Sorry Day gone past, I conclude with a poem I scribed for our children that were taken away from their mother's arms. I think I'll get through this. It also reflects us as young Indigenous service personnel, navigating unknown cultural territory, but always managing to find each other on the ship, in the town, find each other and bond with our countrymen. I defend with no phraseology can be substituted for reality. The poem is Belonging. I was asked to do something for the stolen generation, which I knew nothing about really, even though I was in Canberra, and I wasn't stolen, I was forced in the defense by my mum. The poem is Belong. Assimilation, integration, human cost, taken from where I belong. Desecration, exploitations, spirits lost. How will I ever belong? Red earth, black sky, dark streets, buildings high. Where do I belong? My face black, my skin white. Lifetime struggle, lifetime fight. To whom do I belong? Then one day, tender black hands dried my tears. I lowered my shield and to my spears. I know now and forever, I always did and always will belong. I'll take the opportunity to thank the RSL Australia, RSL Queensland for the invitation down here to be with you and for having the trust in me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uncle Marset, for your wisdom of your words today. We appreciate that. Thank you for your law, sharing that with us. But also, thanks for your cheekiness. And thanks for being savage in the way that you were. Thank you very much. One of the great traditions of commemoration services is the laying of wreaths and floral tributes. It's a beautiful part of the ceremony, and it's a time when we can really reflect. To help us with that process of reflection, I'd like to ask our artist today, Aaron Martin, to come forward and again play for us a beautiful piece that he's created for today's ceremony. Thank you, Aaron. Many of you may have noticed that there was a United Nations and peacekeeping ceremony on just before we began our commemoration today. Down below here on the grounds of Anzac Square, there's people from all nations that have been involved and been the beneficiaries of peacekeeping work. As Aaron played the didgeridoo then, and some of those particular highlights and noises reverberated off the buildings here, they turned and looked up here. It was a wonderful sound and a wonderful moment to see, and I wish you could have seen it. It's certainly something about the didgeridoo that makes people feel wonderful and turn towards us. I'd now like to invite our official wreath layers to enter the shrine and lay their wreaths around the flame and then return to their seats. Honorary Aide-de-Camp Lieutenant Commander Nicholas Robinson, RAN, representing Her Excellency, the Honourable Dr. Jeanette Young, Governor of Queensland. RSL Queensland State President, Major General Stephen Day. Mr. Bart Mellish, MP, Assistant Minister for Veterans Affairs, representing the Honourable Anastasia Palaszczuk, Premier of Queensland. Mr. David Crisafulli, Leader of the Queensland Opposition. Councillor David McLaughlin, representing the Right Honourable Adrian Schrinner, Lord Mayor of Brisbane. Stephen Bates MP, Federal Member for Brisbane. Mr James Lister MP, Shadow Assistant Minister for Veterans. I'll call the representatives of our three armed services together to lay their wreaths. Lieutenant Commander Amy Brawns, representing the Royal Australian Navy. Brigadier Mark Armstrong, representing the Australian Army. And Group Captain Glenn Storer, representing the Royal Australian Air Force. Auntie Lorraine Hatton, OAM, Indigenous Elder of the Australian Army, and Uncle Marsat Ketchell, representing Indigenous service people, past and present. I'd like to ask our further guests to lay their wreaths and tributes at the foot of the stairs and then return to their seats. Mike Harris, representing the Australian American Association, with David Vaughan, representing the British Ex-Services Association. Superintendent Kerry Johnson, representing the Queensland Police Service. Assistant Commissioner Neil Francis, representing the Queensland Fire and Emergency Service. Assistant Commissioner Tony Armstrong, representing the Queensland Ambulance Service. Stephanie Foster, representing the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Honourable James Douglas, KC, representing the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. Erin Lang, representing Reconciliation Queensland. Anne Irwin, representing Legacy Brisbane, and Wendy Giggs, representing the Council of Ex-Service Women's Association Queensland. Rudy Bianchi, representing Far East Strategic Reserve Association Navy, and Nick Garland, representing the National Servicemen's Association of Australia. Kay Morgan, representing the Naval Association of Australia, and Tani Roberts, representing Mates for Mates. Philippa Whelan, representing Open Arms, and Barry Rogers, representing the Australian Light Horse Association. Mr Gordon Kratzman, representing the Sappers Association Queensland, Mr Peter Handy, representing the Vietnam Veterans Federation of Australia, Queensland branch. Liz Grimes, representing Navy Women Queensland, and Mr Peter Jones, Australian Veterans and Defence Council. Brandon Waters, Ella and Maya Giles, representing Len Waters and family, Australia's first Indigenous pilot in the Royal Australian Air Force. I'd now like to invite any other members of the public who may like to come forward and lay their wreaths at the foot of the shrine. If afterwards you would like to place those wreaths inside the shrine around the eternal flame, you're more than welcome to, but we ask you wait until the catafalque party dismounts the shrine. For those of you who can, I'd now ask if you could please be upstanding as we proceed to one of the most solemn components of our ceremony this morning. It'll be the ode read by State President of the RSL, Major General Stephen Day, followed by the last post, a sacred minute of silence, followed by rouse, and then I ask that you please be upstanding, remain upstanding, for the Australian National Anthem. Major General.
They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eyes, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget.
The Australian Army Band Brisbane will now lead us in Advance Australia Fair. Please take your seats. A big thank you this morning to Army Band Brisbane. The soldiers from 11 Brigade and 9 RQR have provided the catafalque party and our flag orderlies today as well. And of course to our performers that have been wonderful here today. We thank all the representatives of the different ex-service associations that have been here today and of course our current acting service people. We thank you for remembering the deeds and the efforts of those Indigenous Australians, the First Nations people that contributed to the defence of this country and signed up and did what they could despite knowing the terrible reactions that they may have had and encountered when they returned home to Australia. We appreciate your service. It's great to see some kids here today wearing the miniature medals of parents or family members. If next year, if everybody here could tell somebody within their family circle to come along to this particular event and again encourage the children to wear those medals, to tell them about the pride in the service of those family members, we will ensure this tradition continues beyond 17 years. Let's hope that every year, from now until we're all gone, people still gather on this particular date and still acknowledge the Indigenous service people of this great country. Could you please be upstanding as the catafalque party dismounts the shrine, followed by the departure of the Governor of Queensland's representative. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the 2023 Indigenous Veterans Commemoration Ceremony has now concluded. As we mentioned before, those who would like to move their personal flowers and tributes into the shrine, you're more than welcome to do that now. And also, take a few moments before you depart today and go and visit the Indigenous Veterans Memorial down in the square. It's a beautiful place to stand there and reflect, take some photos, and share what a wonderful tradition this has now become. Thank you very much. Go back and enjoy the rest of your weekend with your mobs, and thank you for attending the 2023 commemoration service. Thank you.